As the sun rises over Arkansas, the first light crosses the Mississippi, which runs the length of our eastern border. From there, it touches over 90,000 miles of rivers, over 300 lakes, and a landscape fed with 42 inches of annual rainfall. To touch Arkansas is to touch water, which is why, historically, Arkansas has always been considered a water-rich state. Since statehood in 1836, Arkansans have used this abundant resource to grow the state's population, industry, agriculture, and economy. But for all this growth, a price must be paid. And that burden is being borne by the state's lakes, rivers, and aquifers. And those on the front lines of this looming crisis are the state's farmers. One of those farmers is Gary Sitzer, a third-generation farmer who is dealing with a problem by taking steps to use his water more efficiently. It's expensive, but maybe it takes a farmer to really understand the importance of water.
People want to know how much you think or worry about water. We do that. That's pretty much all the time in rice culture in this area. You know, the drainage of getting it off, or storing it in the reservoir, or trying to conserve the water to get everything working better. What you can do to make the land drain better, we can make the irrigate more efficiently. What different things you can do. We rarely do things exactly the same way every year. We'll learn a little different thing, either from something we've done or from another farmer somewhere, or from some research somewhere that we'll try to implement as quick as we can. If it's any way it looks like it'll save us time and money. And I think that's pretty much the mindset of anybody in this part of the state when it comes, even if they don't grow rice, most of the crops are irrigated. And how can they do it more efficiently? How can they can do the things that need to be done?
In 1850, the amount of harvested farmland in Arkansas was about 12,000 acres. Back then, most farmers depended on the weather to water their crops. But as technology improved, they discovered they could harvest more product per acre if they irrigated the land with well water. Since then, the amount of irrigated land has increased to over 4 million acres, which requires over 8 billion gallons of water a day. It is withdrawals like this that are causing problems for the state's aquifers. Aquifers are underground layers of rock, sand, or gravel that are saturated with water and conducted easily enough that it is possible to remove it from the ground through a well. In eastern Arkansas, farmers rely on the Sparta and alluvial aquifers, but after years of heavy use, these aquifers are in trouble. Depletion of the alluvial aquifer has been documented since the 1920s, and by the 1980s, some wells started drying up. Recent measurements in Arkansas County indicate groundwater levels that were once less than 30 feet below the surface are now more than 105 feet below ground. While an aquifer can be recharged by rivers and water seeping through the ground, the current rate of recharge in parts of eastern Arkansas cannot keep up with what is being used. Some say a possible solution to this problem is the Grand Prairie Area Demonstration Project.
The Grand Prairie Area Demonstration Project, that is the fancy name for the White River Irrigation Project in eastern Arkansas, is an effort to take the abundant water out of the White River and pump some of that excess water to farms in the Grand Prairie region to replace the groundwater use, or a good portion of the groundwater use, that is causing the declines in the area, in the aquifers.
This idea started back in the 30s. Farmers on the Grand Prairie have known since the 20s that they were using more water than the aquifer would sustain. And the first answer was, well, let's go grab more water. So they turned to the White River, and they've been trying to get in it since the 1930s and 40s.
Is that I have a letter signed by President Harry Truman to then Governor Sid McMath in the early 1950s, telling him that he hoped that the Grand Prairie project could be completed soon. And of course, that was now well over 50 years ago.
So it has a long history. It's under construction now. The pump site has partially been built. The pumps and motors have been built. And a lot of the on-farm work has been done. Millions and millions of dollars have been spent on this project.
We're just east of Duval's Bluff at the White River. Just behind us is where the pumping plant is going to be constructed. We've got the White River as the source of our water. We've got a short canal that's being built from the White River that conveys water back to the pumping plant itself. The pumping plant will pick the water up, move it through pipelines into open canals up on the prairie for distribution to farmers as far south as Stuttgart. Behind me, you'll see the levee that will eventually be removed. You can see the housing facility for the pumps. There will be a total of 6 pumps, 4 large and 2 small. Those pumps will lift water out of the canal and it will move it back onto the prairie through 2 pipelines, and there will be a canal system that distributes the water on further to the west and south. From the canal, water is distributed across the prairie. It is pumped into irrigation storage reservoirs like you see behind me. This reservoir is about 40 acres. Right now it's dry. It will store enough water to irrigate 300 to 400 acres of cropland depending on the crops that are being grown. We have got about 250 of these reservoirs that have already been installed and about another 250 of them to be installed in the future. That in a nutshell is the Grand Prairie Irrigation Project.
But the project isn't without controversy. David Carruth is a lawyer in Clarendon and a board member for the Arkansas Wildlife Federation. David is opposed to the project.
The plan is to address a water management problem with a water supply solution. The problem generally on the Grand Prairie is that farmers have pumped too much water from the aquifer and they're over pumping it. So the solution they propose is to put a siphon in the White River and pump water to the Grand Prairie and just bring more water. The way I view it, and others who agree with me, is that no, you need to use the water you have more efficiently. You need to make better use of what you have before you start grabbing somebody else's water or water that's being used for another purpose.
But that doesn't dissuade John Edwards, who serves as an attorney and governmental relations officer to the Arkansas Rural Water Association and White River Irrigation District, which supports the Grand Prairie Project.
What the Grand Prairie Project will do, it will actually give people in that region an opportunity to effectively manage the water. At times when the river levels are high, that is the only time that water can be pumped from the river into the system that farmers can take on their on-farm storage or directly let go into their fields to irrigate their crops. But they only do that when the river is high and meets the environmentally set safeguards to preserve wildlife that depends upon the river.
When you start defining what is excess, you have to ask, well, what use is the water in the river being put to? When this river floods, it waters these bottomlands that are rich in timber. So if you want vibrant timber growth, you need the floods. You need the 27-foot river, the 28-foot river. Flood stage is 26 feet. When the proponent says we're only going to take excess water, they assume that the river is not putting that, quote, excess water to good use. But these river bottoms are what they are because the water goes there to create this subtropical type of habitat.
My response back to that is, anyone can say something, but this project has been looked at scientifically for years. All of those studies have been open to the public. I have never one time seen anyone successfully challenge the science behind the withdrawals from this project. Not once.
If the Grand Prairie Irrigation Project is built, it's going to be the first volley in a series of significant water wars in Arkansas. The biggest illustration of it is it opens up the door for the Corps to open up the dams on the upper lakes, Beaver Lake, Table Rock Lake, Bull Shoals Lake, to send water down for irrigation on the lower end of the river. So now you have farmers on the Grand Prairie calling for water that people in northwest Arkansas want or need, and then the political power and who has the clout starts coming into play, and you have a political water war develop.
While the Grand Prairie Irrigation Project is still being debated, a similar but smaller project has already been built. In 1996, Union County was one of 5 Arkansas counties declared to be a critical groundwater area by the Arkansas Natural Resources Commission. A cone of depression was forming in the aquifer under Union County, which meant they had to drill deeper to get to the water, more than 420 feet deep in 1994.
I had a gentleman from El Dorado tell me one time that the water crisis in El Dorado became real the day the mayor of the city told the country club that they could no longer use water to water the golf greens. That's when it became real.